In Unit 8A4, I'm going to talk about aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is a ratio of the width for the first number is how wide an image is to height. The second number is how high the image is. So aspect ratio comes to us from the film era. Film, of course, still around, but that technology of movies was much older than the technology that we're working with of video production. So film aspect ratios could be a variety of things. The technology of film has changed many times over the over 100 years that film has been produced. And so there are lots of different movies that were made at lots of different aspect ratios. There wasn't any one standard. But you might say that a 1.85 to 1 is a typical film aspect ratio. A lot of movies were made at that aspect ratio. Google film aspect ratios and you'll get some really interesting websites that you can read. But remember, it is the ratio of width to height. So the top rectangle you see on your screen there is 1.85 inches wide for every 1 inch tall. So at 1.85 to 1 is the aspect ratio, 1.85 inches wide for every 1 inch tall. And below, I've also put down a typical cinemascope aspect ratio, just to show that film had a variety of standards. The one on the bottom is 2.35 inches wide for every 1 inch tall. In the day those were produced, they were known as cinemascope movies, but you can see lots of different aspect ratios for film. And that, of course, means ratio of width to height. All right, so for in the video world, where we're going to be working, let's bring in that ratio of width to height again. The CRT televisions you've learned about were all made at a 4 to 3 aspect ratio. That decision was made really early in the days of television, and it didn't really match the films that had been produced up to that point, which were all rectangles. Televisions, for most of their history, were close to being a square, 4 inches wide for every 3 inches tall, 4 to 3 aspect ratio. But when the digital televisions were invented and they came out, they tried to correct that problem by becoming more rectangular. I'm sure you've noticed that HD televisions tend to be rectangles, whereas traditional televisions were in a square format. Well, the reason for that is because movies were made at a letterboxed or a widescreen format, and when we wanted to watch movies on television, it made more sense to be rectangular. Bonus information for people who want to know why movies were wide. Well, the reason is because as human beings, our eyes have a wide field of view. If you take your hands and hold them around and put your fingers right at the edge of your peripheral vision and try to trace your peripheral vision, you'll see it's a big kind of oval shape. The closest geometric thing we can get for us square people are a rectangle. So movies have always been a rectangle because we see the world as a rectangle and it just makes more sense. So 16 to 9 is the aspect ratio for HD televisions, which we also call widescreen aspect ratio.